So if we make a little start whilst people are still trying to get in. Hi everyone, my name is Malika. I work for Success at School, and today you've joined this webinar to hear from the Royal Horticultural Society. Green careers are so important and growing even more important every single day. And whether this be something you've thought of or considered before or not, we're really excited to sort of bring the RHS team to share their expertise and all their experience and tell you all about the different opportunities that they have for you. Just so that you are aware, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel tomorrow. We'll also send you guys the recording so you can watch this as many times as you like. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So if you do have any questions that pop into your head, don't be scared, pop them in the chat and we will get down to them at the end. But without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to Leaf and the RHS team.
Fab. Hi everyone, my name's Leaf and I'm here representing the RHS. If you haven't heard of us before, that stands for Royal Horticultural Society. We've been one of the leading horticultural charities for around 200 years now, and probably one of the biggest in the UK. Today's webinar, we're going to explore the world of horticulture and plant-based careers. There's going to be about 4 slides from me, just giving you a bit of context as to the industry and what those jobs might look like. And then we're going to be joined by a couple of my wonderful colleagues to do a bit of a Q&A session to find out more about their roles, how they got into horticulture, what they like about it, those kinds of things. During the presentation, any questions, but just pop them in the chat. If they're addressed to one of either myself or the team, just kind of put the name in there so we can get those directed to the right person. But yeah, it should be about 5-10 minutes of me talking and then straight into the questions. So I thought it'd be useful just to start with, what do we mean by horticulture? Obviously, it's a word that's not kind of used commonly. The word itself is derived from Latin, so 2 words, hortus meaning garden and colere meaning to cultivate. So if you put those 2 together, it's obviously anything to do with gardening, plants, cultivating land. So the industry as a whole, it's more than just gardening. It's the art, science, technology, business of cultivating plants. So that covers everything from tending to your back garden or window boxes or a little pot if you're in a flat, to cutting edge genetic research. So it's a really broad spectrum and covers lots of different areas. The industry employs over 670,000 people in the UK and contributes almost 29 billion to the UK economy. So that's twice the amount that the motor industry contributes. So it's also a lot bigger than most people realise, and there's a lot more people that work in it. It's still a growing sector. It's projected to grow quite exponentially over the next 5-10 years. So it's a sector that's in need of fresh talent and up-to-date skills, and hopefully that's where some of you might come in the not too distant future. So what could your job look like if you went into working in horticulture? I'm going to highlight some of the potential career paths, but it's worth pointing out straight away that there's lots of different options in really diverse areas. So let's have a look at a few now. So to start with, on the left-hand side there, we've got the ones that probably first come to mind for people when you say horticulture, such as a gardener. So obviously a hands-on role, lots of time outdoors in nature, creating and maintaining those kind of natural, beautiful areas that we're all familiar with. Moving on, we've then got arborists who have a similar role, but they focus specifically on trees. But I would say maybe are a little bit more rock and roll because they get to use chainsaws on a daily basis, which the horticulturists and gardeners don't. Then if you're interested in kind of creative pursuits or design, we have careers in things like floristry or garden design. So that allows you to create stunning displays and kind of gardens and designs that can be enjoyed by others as well. So as you can see already there, we've moved from kind of hands-on, being outside in nature, to kind of more indoor creative pursuits. For people that are interested in biology and science, we've got roles that look at the scientific study of plants in an academic setting, such as a research scientist, or if you're more into things like experimenting and this plant development, we focus on bringing those new breeds of plants to life. And then moving a little bit further down again, there are even careers for those who are interested in areas like psychology or health or helping others. So we have horticultural therapists who work for the RHS, and I know they exist in the industry as in general. That photo there is of Azichi. She's based at RHS Garden Bridgewater in Manchester. She's absolutely brilliant. So basically what happens there is people are prescribed time in the therapy garden with Azichi. So they get to spend time outdoors, doing kind of basic horticultural things, so like weeding or planting plants, and it's seen as kind of a form of therapy that allows people to kind of improve their mental and physical health. So as you can see, whether you like being outdoors, you're passionate about sustainability, you're interested in science, there's kind of lots of different career paths all within that umbrella term of horticulture. I've actually included a kind of selection at the bottom there as well, and as you read through them, you've even got things like garden writers or journalists, you've got pest control specialists, you've got irrigation specialists. So there's loads of different areas within horticulture, depending on what your kind of interests are. Why consider working in horticulture? So my background is recruitment, so I've just tried to give 5 reasons why you would want to do it as a career. Obviously there's a lot more, but these are a good starting place, I think. So the first one is it's open to everyone. You can get into horticulture through lots of different pathways. They include T-levels, apprenticeships, diplomas, internships. That makes it open to everyone, regardless of your academic background. It's not an industry where you have to go to university, which obviously makes it more accessible to a lot of different groups. The second one is a job that you can make work for you. So whether you are, like I said in the last slide, interested in gardening, science, design, education, you can shape a career in horticulture around your own personal interests and go into a specialism in that area. It also means that if your kind of interests change as you get older or progress with your career, there's also areas you can pivot and still stay within horticulture as an industry. The third one, earn while you learn. So many of the routes into horticulture that I just mentioned, so for example, the apprenticeships mean that you can get the best of both worlds by developing your skills and getting paid at the same time, rather than having to just do pure education. The fourth one, you can play a crucial role in combating climate change by tackling things like water management, oxygen production, carbon sequestration, caring for the soil, supporting ecosystem health. There's lots of different areas that horticulture really underpins in that area. So if you want a role that contributes towards making the planet healthier and more sustainable, then that's another thing to consider. If people weren't aware, and you probably weren't unless you've been to one of our gardens, RHS scientists dedicate over 100,000 hours every year to finding ways to combat climate change, and that's just within the RHS. So if you add up what all the different scientists across all of horticulture are looking at, then obviously it's a huge impact. And then the fifth one, you can be your own boss. So a lot of horticulturalists establish their own businesses. So that could be a tree surgeon, a landscaping company, a florist. That means that you can enjoy the freedom to shape your future as you see fit. You get more flexible schedules if you've got other responsibilities, and also the potential for higher earning as a young entrepreneur. And then just one final slide before we move into having a chat to Elizabeth and Samara. There are kind of a variety of different routes into horticulture. So you can start at the ground and work your way up. So get an entry-level job, learn on the job as you go, and naturally progress up through that structure. You could undertake taster day sessions or work experience where you get to go to a garden, see what goes on, find out more about the different career paths and meet people who work there. And then you can see if it's something you're interested in and you've got that kind of first bit of experience to pop on your CV as well. There's also volunteering. It can be a great way to get involved in horticulture outside of a career perspective as well, but you might find that if you do some volunteering and you enjoy it, you might want to make that move from a hobby or a pastime into something that you want to pursue as a career, and also again gives you that hands-on experience in the industry. Apprenticeships and internships, they combine a combination of training and hands-on experience. So like I mentioned earlier as well, potential to earn while you learn. And then finally, we've got the more formal qualifications and education side of things. So that could be a part-time or remote qualification offered by providers like the RHS, or it could be a full-time or further education at university or college. Those ones are especially important or relevant for subjects like sciences, research, academic roles where you need that kind of further academic or qualification. So enough from me. Let's hear from two of my wonderful colleagues. I just asked them both to jump off mute if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like to introduce Elizabeth and Samara. They are both colleagues of mine at the RHS, two quite different backgrounds in terms of the areas they work in. I'll just ask you both just to give a short intro as to just your name and what you do at the RHS, if that's okay. Should we start with you, Liz?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Liz and I work as a plant scientist at Wisley Gardens. And basically I specialize in trees and how they respond to the environment. So a lot of my job is to set up experiments and see how trees respond to different fluctuations in everyday weather patterns and how that changes over time.
Brilliant. And Samara?
Yeah, so I'm a horticultural apprentice at Bridgewater. So yeah, being an apprentice, you kind of have to go through all the different curatorial teams we have on site, learn from the different trained horticulturists, do the jobs, like you were saying, while you learn. And yeah, there's an academic side to it as well, so studying and working in the garden.
Fab. So if we could start with you, Samara, just because while I've got you, how did you first become interested in horticulture and what inspired you to start a career in this field?
Yeah, so I was thinking about it. I think probably what inspired me and what got me interested in horty initially was just traveling in general. So like going out to different places. I'm from Manchester. I'm from quite an urban, like from East Manchester. It's quite concrete. And like getting out of that, I think that made me realize like what the world had to offer in terms of like different biomes and different plants in general. Really, I was quite flabbergasted when I started traveling. And then when I got back, I just kind of had to make it my goal to start working outdoors. And it wasn't even specifically horticultural based at the start. It was just getting connected with nature and yeah, getting out there. So I did a bit of environmental education, which makes it sound more detailed than it was. It was more just like taking people out sailing and hiking and things like that. And then that developed to me working in a plant center. So you're kind of seeing a lot of different genuses, species, cultivars coming through your gates every day. And that kind of piqued my interest a bit more. I was like, oh, I think I could be interested in learning more about this. This is a whole different world I'm not really involved with. And yeah, that's led me to the apprenticeship, really, like understanding and learning that, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And just on the subject of your apprenticeship then, can you describe a typical day for you at the moment as in your life as a horticultural apprentice?
Sure. So yeah, like I was saying at the start, as an apprentice, you rotate through all the different, we call them curatorial departments. That's just the gardening departments at work. At Bridgewater, we have 3. We're quite developing, so I think there's probably going to be quite a few more in the future. So we have a outer wall department, which is kind of focused on community well-being. They've got like a new Blue Peter garden as well, so it's about educating people. So that's a really cool one, and we I spend a month there. Then currently I'm with the inner wall department. They have a fabulous kitchen garden, so you learn a lot about edibles, fruits, veg, that kind of thing. And they also have glass houses. So they have a med house and a fruit house, so you kind of learn a bit more about tropical plants and things that the UK doesn't generally grow. We push the boundaries there a little bit and try to do other things there. And then our final department that I do a month on as well is woodland. So that's a really cool area because it's basically everything on site that isn't the walled garden, which is a very vast kind of area. So they kind of focus on a lot of different things, but I would say their main thing is aquatic planting, but then also ecological planting. So working with wildlife, working with nature, and they work quite closely with the arborists as well. So yeah, as you can imagine, the woodland. So yeah, it's a really mixed bag. The day in the life, I couldn't really say it's going to be this and it's going to be that because it changes all the time. But generally, yeah, it's a month on each department. And yeah, you shadow the horticulturists, you do the work and you learn a lot.
Brilliant. And is there a particular department that you've enjoyed more than others at the moment, or a favourite one so far?
Ooh. Tough one. I have got my big thing that even getting into horticulture is I do a lot of art, so I was really interested in design and really bolstering that kind of knowledge there. But since as well, not to say that that's diminished in any way, but I'm really starting to get an emerging interest for edibles and fruit growing and things like that. So the inner walled garden where they had their kitchen garden is, I would say, probably my favorite at the moment. It's just there's just so much to learn, I suppose, when it comes to growing stuff and then like harvesting it for yourself and fresh ingredients, that kind of thing. So yeah, I would probably go with that at the moment.
Brilliant. Moving across to you, Liz, same two questions. So how did you first become interested in horticulture? What inspired you to get into the career? And can you talk us through a day in the life of your plant scientist role?
Well, my road into horticulture wasn't very straightforward, really, either. I was first more interested in kind of agriculture, and just when I started to study more kind of that idea of how are we producing enough food for the world, and how are we going about planting, and how are we going about having the area for it, and the science behind that. And then I think then I realized that was all to do with plant science, really. And then the supervisor I had for my master's, he was really interested in plants and how they deal with really dry areas. So there's different strategies of how plants kind of survive in really harsh environments, and I just kind of that piqued my interest in, like, yeah, why do some trees or why do some species really thrive in areas that others don't? And then that's kind of why I honed in on trees, and then I was kind of curious about forestry, because we had worked a lot on kind of trees in my studies, and then from forestry I suddenly have this background of working with different plants, and I'm originally from Norway. So I did my first degree in Norway, and then I came to England to do my environmental science degree in my master's, went to Spain to do a PhD there. And that's when I first came to England afterwards and got a role with the Royal Horticultural Society to work in horticulture. So really just been in horticulture for the last 3 years. And what's really interesting coming from my background is that there's so much species you work with there, because people have so much different species in their garden. There's not just like one plant that we plant for food in agriculture or forestry. There are often a lot of one species in the garden. In horticulture you have so much, so that's kind of the new area, which is really fascinating to me, how many different species we work with.
Yeah, I guess that also kind of backs up what I was saying and what Samara was saying, that every day is different. It's a really varied industry, lots of different kind of areas you can get into, just as like there's just as many plants and different areas you can specialize in.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I can say that my day is so diverse as Samara, though, because I don't work all over garden. I do a lot of working in the office. So today, but I mean, I do also get to do field work. So a day for me depends on the season. Like in the winter time, I'm a lot in the office. I do a lot of looking at data that we collected during the growing season, and then do a lot of analyzing and writing about that. But in the summer we do a lot of collecting data when the plants are more active. But we do the occasional traveling. So today I have been at Bridgewater and see this lovely garden that you talked about. So that's my first time there. So that's really lovely as well, that I get the opportunity to go to the other gardens and see what's growing in other places and what other people are doing and be outside, So yeah, it depends on the season, but I get to do both as well, so that's really nice.
Brilliant. Moving back to you, Samara, what advice would you give to students who are considering potentially getting into a career in horticulture?
Sure. I think the biggest thing I could probably say is that when we talk about horticulture or like the industry, like I definitely know that before I got into it, I was like, well, what's the difference? Like I love my gardening and like doing this, and gardening I think sounds a little bit more accessible, and then horticulture can maybe be a bit of a not off-putting, but maybe sound a bit intimidating to a lot of people who are not in the fold or don't really know what horticulture is. So I think, and it says in my little bio there, lovely, that horticulture is for everyone. It shouldn't be off-putting to anyone that there is an industry where you can study and learn more, but then also do that practical side of things. It's much more than just gardening, I would say, but it is for everyone. And I think the traditional roots that horticulture has, the tide is definitely changing the more we go on with, and the more we have a different mindset when it comes to things like sustainability, different methods. There isn't just one way to do things anymore, and everyone can be a horticulturist in their own way. So I think that's the biggest piece of advice, is that if you've got a passion for it and you know that you have a respect for plants and the natural world, then I think it really is for you, and it's worth pursuing, whether or not you think that it's a little bit scary.
And I guess there's new areas of horticulture developing all the time as well. So I know there's been a lot of kind of noise around people gardening from their balconies or flats or things like that. That's become a whole kind of canon now that's been developed, and the RHS are actually running an urban show for the first time this year in Manchester, which is going to be exploring all that kind of area. So there might even be areas of horticulture that don't exist yet that people could create or get into as the planet and our needs and everything continue to evolve.
This is it, exactly. And that's kind of how I started, with like being from an urban background and not really having much exposure to gardening or horticulture growing up, but then realizing that this is really what I'm meant to be doing. So I think if more people can kind of get through that initial hurdle of this is what I'm meant to be doing, regardless of where I've come from or what you think that the industry might have to hold, then yeah, it's great.
Fab. Same question to you, Liz. Any advice for students considering a career in horticulture? Obviously, you've got a bit of a different background and you've come from a really academic setting, but anything you could share with someone who may be in the same position and coming from that academic perspective?
Well, yeah, I was going to say actually that, because they're from an academic perspective, it's been very theoretical at some point. I think if I was like now wanting to get into horticulture and maybe just didn't even know if that's what you wanted to do, then try to get some practical experience of it. Like you say, just if you wanted to grow something yourself or go to a garden or a nursery and see what it is about and what does it actually mean to grow a plant. And I grew up in a very rural area, but I didn't really kind of notice plants in that way. It takes kind of someone to give you that perspective to start actually noticing plants and see what's going on and how valuable they are. So I think if you're not sure, and there's so many different levels, like you say, so you could just go to, if you wanted to get practical experience at a nursery, like summer job there or an internship somewhere. But also if you wanted to pursue the academic career, there is many ways to do it. That it doesn't need to be set on from the get-go. I did an environmental science degree. It's very broad, so you can choose along the way. It just happened so that I chose all the subjects that led to plant science and from an agriculture perspective first. So it can be quite broad first, and then you can specialize.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think there are any specific skills or qualities that are really important for success in horticulture? Is there any that you could pick out, or?
Well, for me, I think in terms of a science setting, I think curiosity is very important. It's so many things that you don't know when you set off, because you want to try to figure out something new. So you need to be curious about what you're doing. You can't just be like, oh, well, this is how it is. Everything is about asking a question. And also, I think you need to be really good at doing things you don't quite know how to do, and be able to fail as well, because it's experimental. You set up an experiment, you do something, it doesn't work out. It's not like textbook, because it's all very practical. You do an experiment and you see what the answer is, and sometimes it's what you expected and sometimes it's not, or everything goes wrong and you have to learn from that and do it again. So I think that's quite a lot of resilience in doing science, at least experimental science. And with plants, like, you don't always know what they're going to do. Sometimes they die, or sometimes they just don't respond in the way you hope they would. So I think curiosity and resilience probably is some of them. the skills I would point out.
Perfect. Samara, have you got anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think leading on from it, curiosity in a different way for me, because like as an apprentice and as a learner getting into it, like just not being afraid to ask questions. So that curiosity of just always asking, what's this and how does that grow and what kind of habit is this, and just always asking questions is definitely one that I would recommend, because that's how I've got to where I am now. I think you do have to have an element of being hardworking, especially with what I've been doing, because like in Manchester, it's been raining quite a lot recently. I've been out in it every day. It can like get a little bit much sometimes. So I think just having a little bit of resilience and being quite hardworking, because there's sometimes it's not just a lovely sunny day and you're pruning an apple tree or you're doing some roses. It's like, well, we've got to mulch all these beds, or we've got to I don't know, like plant 1,000 plants for a new display or whatever. So it is sometimes labor intensive, not always. And like we said, there's loads of different avenues into horticulture if that's not what you envisage for yourself, but it can be. So definitely a bit hardworking, and just overall just passion for it and just inquisitive nature, I would say, because like there's just so much to it. If you are wanting to get to know everything, it's going to take time. So just having that inquisitive nature and keeping on going with it. Yeah,
definitely. And I think something that's very common across the industry is everyone's happy to share their knowledge and insight. So if you do ask questions, people love to tell you the answer and give you more information, and if they don't know, signpost you in a way that you can come find it. So yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Are there any, this is to either or both of you, are there any kind of surprising aspects to your job that people might not expect? As we've seen, there's some kind of career options that maybe people don't first expect. Are there any aspects to your job that are similar to that?
Yeah.
who wants to go first?
I can go first. Yeah, there's definitely a lot you don't think about as a scientist. You think everyone is just like in a lab coat, pristine, everything goes to plan. Now, I think a surprising aspect is that we do a lot of different jobs that you don't necessarily know how to do. Like you set up a practical thing and maybe no one has done it before, so you really need to be kind of problem solving all the way of like, how would I set up this experiment if I wanted to have it as best possible outcome at the end of the project. So it's a lot of you going around thinking of practical solutions, like probably, you know, setting up a large scale field experiment with fencing and irrigation, and we don't necessarily have that background on help on that, so you learn as you go, really. I think that's the surprising element for me.
Yeah, I think you touched on something really important there as well, that science is not just wearing white lab coats and playing with vials. It's a really diverse industry, and there's lots of other things kind of going on behind that.
Yeah, definitely.
Samara?
Yeah, I guess two big things stand out for me. Like, so it might sound a bit obvious, but again, if you're coming in from a baseline level of not really knowing much about horticulture, like just understanding that everything is connected with what we do. So like the more I've kind of got to learn, and then I'm really interested in like fungi and mycorrhizal and stuff like that, and understanding how that helps with plant diversity and then wildlife diversity, like just understanding that everything is holistically connected with things. That's quite a surprising thing to me. But then also in a more like sciencey way, I guess, and just the industry in general, everything is ever evolving with like, so things are always like renamed and reclassified and this, that, and the other. And it's quite surprising to me how the more we understand and the more research there is done about horticulture, the more we understand that we don't know as much as we think we do. And this is always being renamed and there's that. So yeah, it's never cut and dry is what I would say there. That surprises me.
Yeah, really interesting. So one final question, it feels very appropriate. Obviously, we're from the RHS. So do you have a favourite plant or horticultural project that you've worked on, and what's made it special or memorable for you? Samara, should we just start with you while we've got you?
Sure, yeah. My favourite plant is definitely Passiflora, commonly known as the passion flower. I love plants with a climbing habit, and that has got a lovely habit, so it can kind of like engulf structures and just go upwards. I think it's probably me being from, again, like quite a small urban environment, like growing upwards safe space. So I'm always into my climbers in that respect. It's really ornate as well. So like if you Google it, like the petals and just all the like the stamen and stuff, lots of lovely intricacies to it. It's quite tropical. So yeah, it's not really something that, well, it does. There's cultivars that do well in the UK, definitely, so it can be grown here. But I just like my tropical plants, and it produces passion fruit as well, so that's always a bonus. In terms of a project, we get a little bit of responsibility as apprentices at work. So at Bridgewater, we've all got like a raised bed display in the kitchen garden, and I've themed mine on plants that you can harvest for physical or mental well-being, so stuff that you can brew in teas or like make into creams and things like that. And I think having chats with the public and like allowing a bit of interpretation for my bed and just showing, oh, this can be used for that and this and that. So I've really enjoyed working on that.
Brilliant. And moving on to you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think I have to say Aleppo pine. Pinus halepensis is a Mediterranean pine because I worked on it for like 4 years. So, I mean, it could have gone both ways. But it's a very, it's a very resistant pine that grows in the very kind of edge of where we hardly have any rainfall, and it still persists. And I just find it very fascinating how it's able to kind of shut down completely under the drought periods and not use any water and then still come back and stay there. So I think it's a very hardy plant, and I mostly work with trees. So and it's been, a lot of field work. I come back to practical experience as the one I go back to. But it's a lot of field work, which is always fun to do because you have this very kind of honed in focus on something you want to find out in a specific area or for a specific species, and you go there and you kind of study this at all times, having to know when the plants are going to start being active in the mornings. Maybe you have to be there before the sunrise to understand what the soil does before it starts drying off water from the soil. So I think I'm going to go with that one for me. Yeah.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, that was the last question from me. I've seen that we've had a few questions popping up through the chat, so I'll hand back over, but I'll be here to answer any questions that are directed at me.
Fab, thank you guys. I feel like I learnt quite a lot from that, and I think I've got some questions. Firstly, there are 2 plants that are not looking very healthy behind me. They might need a little bit of looking after. But we've got quite a few questions. The first one, and I had quite a few questions come in straight to me as well, was about science and horticulture. And is it possible to get into a horticultural related sort of career if you haven't studied any science, whether that be at A levels or at university?
So if you're looking to go into one of the other pathways that's maybe not purely academic, so the things that are work-based, so like our apprenticeships, internships, those routes are accessible to anyone. Kind of, it doesn't really matter what background of academic skills that you've got. Obviously, that might be different for university courses. So I know the RHS offers a master's, for example, in horticulture, and they do prefer you to have some background in one of those kind of science subjects. But there definitely are routes into horticulture that don't need you to have studied typically science-related topics, if that makes sense.
There's some green colleges as well, isn't it, that you can go into without science background and then go from there?
Yeah, there's lots of you can do qualifications as well that you don't need that kind of A-level or higher level of experience in. So the RHS level 2 qualification, for example, you can study that, and that's kind of a horticultural industry standard qualification.
Great. And with those sort of apprenticeships that you've just mentioned, what does the application process look like? Is it quite hands-on? Is it assessment centre based? Could you just elaborate a little bit on the application itself?
Samara, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, defo. So I applied a couple of years back. I did initially a standard online, this is who I am, a little bit of a personal statement about why I wanted the role. And then from there, once I got an interview, it was mainly about talking to the garden managers, then getting a feel for me and them, And I think I did a bit of a practical day as well, just kind of bit of general planting, weeding, spent a day with the teams just to see if I was a good fit, but it wasn't very intense in terms of like science-based questions or yeah, it was more about me as a person and what I wanted to bring to the industry and yeah, what skills I wanted to enhance while I was there. So that was kind of what the application looked like for me. It wasn't necessarily, like you said, assessment center based. It didn't feel that the word official, rigid to me. It was more just getting a sense for the teams and yeah, doing a bit of hands-on work.
Fab, thank you. And then we've got a question for Liz is, at what university did you study environmental science, and what are some examples of the modules that you studied?
Oh, let me see if I can remember the modules that I studied. But I studied at Lancaster University. And there was I mean, I did some soil modules, soil health, sustainable agriculture, plant health, and plant physiology. And then I did some general ones as well, which was more like ecology and the general environment. But I think it was, yeah, the plant health and the soil health and sustainable agriculture that really got me into plant science.
Right. And in terms of that structure, did you sort of get to pick and choose those modules throughout, or were there sort of set modules that you had to pick?
I could pick them. Yeah, it was quite at the Lancaster Environmental Centre. It was quite, the environmental degree was quite open to that. You can just pick and choose. Yeah. There was some like you had to have, but it was quite open. There was quite a lot to choose from.
Great. And then Samara, you just mentioned that when you were sort of doing your application process, they asked you where you saw your career going to and what skills you wanted to learn. We've got quite a tough question here, and it's where do you sort of see yourself in 5 years? How have you found that your career has progressed?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because so my apprenticeship is a 2-year thing. I'm coming to the end of that now, so I've had to think about that myself quite a lot. I actually got a job offer yesterday, so
so happy to hear
Congrats.
that.
not to toot my own horn or anything. So yeah, I'm continuing to study. It's kind of leading back to what I've been saying all this time, is that there's just so much of horticulture that I want to keep on learning. Now that I've kind of like peeled the stone back, there's just so much that I want to develop on. So my emerging love for edibles and like herbalism, that kind of thing. And yeah, so my course currently is like a level 2 in horticulture. So come the summer, I'll have that certification. I am now going to be going on to doing like a level 3 and 4, which is a little bit more project design based. There's a little bit more of I won't lie, there is a very hard academic side to it as you develop through. So I'll be writing a few more like theses, and there's a herbarium project where you actually get to look at one specific plant. Say, like I mentioned Passiflora before, you'd look at as many genuses as possible within that and kind of study their differences and write about them. So that's where I see myself immediately. And then I think after that, I want to kind of get out of the UK for a little bit longer and see what the world has to offer in a horticultural sense. So I'm thinking maybe like New Zealand, Canada, that kind of thing. Just getting out into different climates and seeing things from a different perspective.
Yeah, we need to get you somewhere with some tropical passion flowers, don't we?
Exactly.
And then we've got another question about house plants specifically and growing plants indoors. Does horticulture include the topic of house plants? Are there any possibilities in the RHS to work in a related sort of sector?
So yep, horticulture definitely includes houseplants. It's an area that is relatively new, I think, to horticulture. It's taken off a lot in the last 10 years, so the industry is kind of catching up with that interest. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the RHS Urban Show coming to Manchester this year, and that's going to be a large part of that is going to be focused on houseplants. So it's definitely an area that's developing, and there's definitely going to be jobs and opportunities in that area, but it's not as big as the traditional garden setting because the houseplant kind of explosion has been the last 10 years.
Great. And then, because we've got quite a few students on here, I think the biggest topic here is about finding work experience, the different types of work experience that are offered. And the first one is do you guys have any tips on finding that work experience? And secondly, sort of what are the different routes of work experience that you do offer?
I'm just going to skip forward a slide on the presentation and go to this one. So I'm in the new shoots team. We are looking at offering work-based training at the RHS. So there are other providers obviously out there in the industry, but we offer things like work experience and taster days and a few of the other things I mentioned. So if you scan that QR code, that'll take you to our website and you can read all about our work experience and different initiatives that we've got. There's also a number of other kind of industry bodies that I could signpost you towards if you are particularly interested in work experience and being signposted to those other places. If you want to drop me an email at that email address there, newshoots@rhs.org.uk, I'm happy to share a few of the links for you to look into. But yeah, our RHS website is a good place to start because that'll give you a flavour for what kinds of things you should be doing in an internship or work experience, and you can kind of build out your search from there.
Thanks. I'm sure they'll find that super, super useful. And you sort of mentioned we've got houseplants that's growing, and you mentioned that there's quite a few new developments when it comes to horticulture. Do you sort of see sort of a new trend, whether that be sustainability or something sort of coming up within this sphere that maybe students can sort of have a little bit of a research about to help with any applications that they do make?
I mean, I think definitely for us in the science team, sustainability and biodiversity and climate change, they're massive topics. And in terms of plant science, we have a lot of interest both in the team and also from the public about planting for pollinators and kind of how to best create landscapes and homes for insects. And that's, I don't know what you think about it, Samara, but there's a lot of interest around what to plant for creating these habitats for insects and pollinators. Yeah.
Even from like a design viewpoint, like I was on a course not long ago, and a lot of like traditionally it was designing for, I don't know, like different kind of like recreation things and what have you, but there's a big focus now on designing for wildlife. So like you say, attracting those pollinators, bee and butterfly gardens, but then also just like your traditional kind of like English gardens, like making sure that hedgehogs can get into the garden and maybe getting a pond in there and stuff like that. So I think that is a big avenue. And then something else I would build on as well is that there's a big, obviously like as we develop into like a new technological age, I feel like there's a big pushback in terms of people's mental health is really suffering from that. So then therapeutic gardening, community gardening, we do it quite well at Bridgewater, I would say, and just getting people to think about horticulture as a means to heal is a really big emerging avenue within the sector that is only just starting to get explored. So
That's all really, really interesting. And then lastly, sort of we're coming to time now. Thank you guys for taking time out of your evening. But I sort of have one final question, because you guys have mentioned that no 2 days really are the same. Do you guys have any standout days in your career?
I'll jump in because mine's really short, and then I'll let the other two talk. And mine was the end of my first week, and I've worked about 8 years in recruitment in a office job in Manchester city centre, where all we could see out of our window was another office block. And at the end of my first week on the Friday, it was about 4 o'clock. It was golden hour, and I walked out of the office into the middle of RHS Garden Bridgewater and thought, this is my office. I work in this beautiful garden. And obviously all jobs to do horticulture have plants somewhere. So that's been my kind of career highlight so far.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm not sure if it's like a highlight, but I'm just gonna mention today because I went, to Bridgewater, and we started in the garden. We sampled some samples, looking for this virus. We have both water sampling and soil samples and plant material samples, and just being in a new space. And Bridgewater is beautiful, and then just having this going around sample, and you're just like in the middle of a bush while like people are walking past and like, what are you doing? And you're just like, oh, this is just part of the job, just collecting water from this pond and see if everything is okay. And I just kind of love those moments where you just like seems like you're in a very kind of weird situations, but you're looking for something specific. You want to keep everything disease free, and at the same time you really want to take care of that lovely environment that you're in. So I'm just going to say that.
Oh, I love it. Lovely. And Samara, have you got one yet?
Yeah, defo. I think my favorite moment so far, it was a really hot day last summer. I was planting water lilies in the Paradise Pond, which sounds like beautiful, and it was. I'm not gonna lie. So like getting my waders on, planting the things in like different areas, and kind of getting a bit wet, but then like it's just a beautiful kind of like ethereal day. So yeah, it was lovely. That's a highlight for me.
Gosh, it sounds lovely. It sounds so lovely. So thank you guys once again. We really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your evenings and having a listen, and obviously a massive thank you to the RHS team. I know I learnt so much, and I would like to come and visit Bridgewater since it's so beautiful. But we will definitely send all the questions that you do have to the RHS team. Again, feel free to scan this for more information, or head over to our website for all the roles that they do have live. You will get a recording of this webinar tomorrow morning, so please feel free to watch this as many times as you like. But thank you once again, and we hope you have a lovely evening. Bye bye.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.